On June 9, 2026, the trustees who watch over Social Security released a report that quietly moved a date closer. Not by a decade, by 3 months. And that small shift changed the math on millions of retirement plans, including maybe yours. By the end of this, you will know the exact year your check could shrink, by how much, and the quiet mistake that is about to cost some people far more than the cut itself. Here is the headline, straight from the 2026 Trustees Report. The fund that pays retirees, the one called Old Age and Survivors Insurance, is now projected to run short in the fourth quarter of 2032. That is according to the Social Security Administration itself, and it was confirmed by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Last year, the same trustees pointed toward early 2033. This year, they pointed to late 2032. The deadline moved toward you, not away from you. A quarter of a year may sound like nothing, but for a system this size, and for a plan as personal as your retirement, direction is everything, and this year the direction was the wrong one. And when that fund runs short, the checks do not stop. That is the part almost everyone gets wrong. Social Security keeps collecting payroll taxes from every working American, and it keeps paying benefits, but it can only pay what comes in. The trustees say that in 2032, the money coming in covers about 78% of what is promised. The other 22% simply is not there. An automatic cut of 22% across the board for everyone on the retiree program at once in the same month. Think about what 22% means on a real check. The average retired worker in 2026 collects about $2,071 a month, according to the Social Security Administration. Cut that by 22%, and you lose roughly $455 every single month. CNBC reported that once you include the households drawing larger benefits, the average loss could land near $500 a month. That is not a rounding error. For a lot of people, that is the grocery budget. That is the Medicare supplement. That is the difference between a comfortable month and a careful one. Now here is the question that should keep you watching. If the cut is not until 2032, why does a report in the summer of 2026 matter to you today? Because the decisions that protect you or expose you are being made right now, in the years before the deadline, not after it. And there is one move that fear is pushing people to make this very year, a move that locks in a smaller check for the rest of their lives, deadline or no deadline. We will get to that, and it may be the most important 2 minutes of this whole video. But first you need to understand exactly what the trustees said, because the details are where your plan lives or dies. Every year a group called the Board of Trustees publishes a report on the health of Social Security. It is not political theater. It is an actuarial checkup, the same math done the same way every year, so that anyone can see the trend without spin. The 2026 edition landed on June 9, and the Bipartisan Policy Center walked through exactly what changed and why it matters. Start with the fund that matters most to retirees. Social Security is actually two funds, not one. The first pays retirees and survivors. The second pays people who cannot work because of a disability. The retiree fund is the giant of the two. The trustees project it will be able to pay full benefits until the fourth quarter of 2032. After that, without action from Congress, it can only pay about 78% of what is scheduled. The Social Security Administration said this in plain language in its own press release in June. 78 cents paid on every dollar promised. That gap of 22 cents is the automatic cut everyone is talking about. Now you will see a second date float around in the headlines, and it confuses a lot of people, so let me clear it up right now. Some reports say 2034. That number combines the retiree fund and the disability fund, as if they were one single pot of money. On that combined basis, the depletion year is 2034, and at that point about 83% of benefits could be paid, which works out to a 17% cut instead of 22. But here is the catch that changes everything. The two funds are legally separate. Money sitting in the disability fund cannot automatically be spent on retirees unless Congress passes a law to combine them first. So the honest date for a retiree to circle on the calendar is the retiree fund date, late 2032. The 2034 number is the friendlier version, and it quietly assumes a fix that has not actually happened yet. The disability fund, for what it is worth, is in good shape. The trustees say it can pay full benefits for the next 75 years. So if you hear a rumor that Social Security disability is about to collapse, that is not what this report says at all. The pressure is entirely on the retiree side, and there is a simple reason for that. That is where the enormous wave of the baby boom generation is landing right now, millions of people leaving the workforce and starting to collect at the same time. Let me put the two numbers side by side so they stick in your memory. Retiree fund alone, the year 2032, a 22% cut. Combined funds, the year 2034, a 17% cut. Either way you slice it, the trustees are telling you the same story. Sometime in the early 2030s, unless the law changes, the check gets smaller. Not zero, smaller. And the exact size of that haircut depends on decisions that no one in Washington has made yet. So why should you trust these numbers rather than the loudest voice you scroll past online? Because the trustees have no incentive to scare you. Their job is the opposite of that. They are legally required to hand Congress a sober, conservative estimate every single year, and their track record on the depletion date has been remarkably steady for more than a decade. When their date moves, even by a single quarter, it is because the underlying reality moved underneath it. So the real question becomes this. What moved this year? Why did a fund that looked stable last summer suddenly look 3 months worse? The answer is not what most people expect, and it has nothing to do with waste or fraud or a missing pile of cash. That is next. When a retirement system for an entire country gets worse in a single year, you expect a scandal, a raided account, a missing pile of cash. That is not what happened here. The 2026 report got worse for 3 quiet reasons, and understanding them tells you whether this problem is temporary or permanent. The answer to that will shape how you feel about every decision that follows. The biggest reason is births. The trustees lowered their long-run assumption for how many children the average American woman will have, dropping it from 1.9 to 1.75, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. That sounds like a tiny change. It is not. Social Security is what economists call a pay-as-you-go system. The taxes taken from today's workers pay today's retirees, almost dollar for dollar. Fewer babies today means fewer workers in 20 and 30 years, which means fewer people paying in at exactly the moment you are drawing out. When the trustees marked down the birth rate, they marked down the entire future workforce, and the fund's long-term math got heavier overnight. Second reason is immigration. The trustees also lowered their assumptions for how many new workers will arrive in the country, reflecting more restrictive policy, as the Bipartisan Policy Center noted in its breakdown. This matters more than most people realize. Immigrants tend to arrive young and then work and pay into the system for decades before they collect anything back. Fewer of them, arriving sooner, means less money flowing into the fund during exactly the years it needs the most support. So the two great demographic dials, births and arrivals, both turned the wrong way in the same report, at the same time. The third reason will genuinely surprise you, because it started its life as good news. In 2025, Congress passed a large tax and spending package, and one piece of it reduced the income taxes that many retirees owe on their Social Security benefits. If you are collecting right now, that felt like a gift. Lower taxes on your check. Who would argue with that? But here is the twist that almost no one ever learns. Those taxes on benefits do not vanish into the general treasury and disappear. They flow straight back into the Social Security Trust Fund as revenue. It is one of the streams that feeds the system. So when Washington cut the tax on benefits, it also quietly cut one of the pipes filling the tank. The Bipartisan Policy Center flagged this directly as one of the reasons the outlook worsened this year. A tax break for retirees today made the fund a little weaker for retirees tomorrow. That is the kind of trade-off that never makes the headline, and it is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to show you. Put those 3 forces together and you understand why the date moved. It was not one dramatic event you could point at. It was births, arrivals, and a revenue stream, all nudging the same direction at once. And that matters enormously for how you should read the future, because 2 of those 3 forces are slow and structural. A birth rate does not bounce back in a year or 2, An aging population does not reverse itself, which means this is not a passing scare that fixes itself the moment the economy improves. The pressure is baked into the age of the country itself. So how deep is the underlying hole, really, once you strip away the yearly noise and the headlines? The trustees put a hard number on it, and it is a number so large it is genuinely difficult to picture. But you should see it, because it explains why the easy fixes that everyone wishes for are not actually easy at all. That is where we go next. Every year the trustees measure the gap between what Social Security has promised to pay and what it can actually afford, stretched out over the next 75 years. This year that gap reached 4.42% of all taxable payroll, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Translate that percentage into dollars, and it is roughly $31 trillion in today's money. The Bipartisan Policy Center put the figure at about $30.3 trillion, up from $26.1 trillion just 1 year earlier. Read that again slowly. In a single report, the shortfall grew by more than $4 trillion. That is the direct cost of those quiet demographic changes we just walked through. I know that trillions stop meaning anything past a certain point. The number is so big it goes numb. So let me make it human instead. The reason the hole keeps growing comes down to one simple ratio that has been sliding for 60 years. Back in 1960, there were about 5 workers paying in for every 1 person drawing benefits, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. 5 to 1. The system was flush with cash. Today that ratio has fallen to about 2.9 workers for every beneficiary, and the trustees project it will keep falling, down to roughly 2.2 to 1 by the 2070s. Fewer and fewer people carrying more and more retirees on their paychecks. That is the entire story of Social Security's trouble in a single number. Now layer longer lives on top of that. A person who is 65 today can expect to live far longer than a person who was 65 when Social Security was first designed. The Bipartisan Policy Center notes that life expectancy at age 65 has risen more than 50% since 1940. Longer retirements mean more years of checks per person. The system was built for a country that worked, retired, and passed on inside a much shorter window of time. That country simply no longer exists, and the basic math of the program never got fully updated to match the country we actually became. Here is a detail that quietly makes the whole thing worse, and almost no one talks about it. Social Security only taxes wages up to a cap, and it only reaches so much of the nation's total pay. Back in 1983, about 90% of all covered wages were subject to the tax. Today that figure has fallen to about 83%, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. As more and more of the country's income has shifted toward the highest earners, whose pay above the cap is not taxed for Social Security at all, a bigger and bigger slice of American wages escapes the system entirely. Meanwhile, the tax rate itself, 12.4% split between you and your employer, has not changed in more than 40 years. A shrinking share of wages taxed, an unchanged rate, a rising number of retirees, and longer lives all at once. That is why the hole is $30 trillion deep, and why it keeps getting deeper. Let me try one more way to make $30 trillion real, because the number is so large it slides right off the mind. The entire annual economy of the United States, everything the country produces in a year, is somewhere in the range of $29 to $30 trillion. So the 75-year shortfall in Social Security is roughly the size of an entire year of everything America makes and sells. That is the scale of the promise the system has made and cannot currently keep. It is not a budget line that got a little tight. It is one of the largest financial gaps in the country's history, and it grew by more than $4 trillion in the space of one report. When you understand that, you understand why serious people, on both sides of the aisle, treat this as one of the defining domestic questions of the decade. So the next time you hear a politician promise an easy, painless fix, hold that $30 trillion number in your mind. A problem this size does not close with a clever tweak or a bit of belt tightening. It closes with real money from somewhere, and there are only a few places that money can come from: higher taxes, smaller benefits, or some combination of the two. There is no fourth option hiding in a drawer. But before you let that number crush your mood, there is something crucial you need to know. This is not the first time Social Security has stared down a deadline exactly like this one. It has been here before, closer than this, and Washington acted. Understanding what happened last time will completely change how you read the 2032 date. That is next, and it is the part that should calm you down. Here is the piece of history that the scary headlines almost always leave out. Social Security has faced a real, immediate funding crisis before, and it did not collapse. In the early 1980s, the program was not looking at a shortfall years down the road. It was months away from being unable to pay full benefits. This is not ancient legend. It happened, and the people watching this who were working adults back then may remember it. What did Washington do? In 1983, after a bipartisan commission studied the problem, Congress passed a sweeping set of reforms that were signed into law. Those reforms did several things at once, and they are worth understanding, because they are almost exactly the menu of options on the table again today. Lawmakers gradually raised the full retirement age from 65 towards 67. They brought new categories of workers into the system, so more people were paying in. They accelerated a scheduled increase in the payroll tax, and they began taxing a portion of benefits for higher-income retirees, creating that very revenue stream we talked about earlier. The result was that Social Security kept paying full benefits, and the 1983 fix bought the system roughly half a century of runway. That slow rise in the retirement age is not just history. It is finishing right now, in front of you. The full retirement age has been climbing by small steps for decades as a direct result of that 1983 law, and it reaches 67 for everyone born in 1960 or later in November of 2026, according to Kiplinger and the Social Security Administration. In other words, you are living through the final step of the last great Social Security rescue this very year. The deadline the country faced in 1983 was met, and the proof is landing in your mailbox and your benefit statement in a matter of months. Why does this matter so much for how you read the 2032 date? Because it tells you the most likely outcome is not a cliff. It is a compromise. Social Security is often called the third rail of American politics, the one no politician wants to touch, precisely because voters punish anyone who lets it fail. More than 71 million people rely on it today, according to AARP, and older Americans vote in enormous numbers. A 22% across-the-board cut to those 71 million people would be one of the most unpopular events in modern political history. Both parties know this. That is exactly why, historically, a deal has always come together before the deadline rather than after it. Now, none of that is a guarantee. This is the honest part. The politics today are more divided than they were in 1983, and Congress has shown it can let deadlines get dangerously close before acting. The commission that produced the 1983 fix operated in a different Washington, so the lesson here is not that you should relax completely and assume it is handled. The lesson is more useful than that. It is that the 2032 cut is a projection of what happens if nothing changes, and something almost always changes. Betting your entire retirement plan on the worst case, the case where Congress does nothing at all for years, is betting against a track record that stretches back to the 1930s. So hold two truths at the same time. The shortfall is real and the pressure is genuine, and the country has faced this exact kind of moment before and found a way through it. That balance, taking it seriously without panicking, is the mindset that protects your money. Because the real danger in this story is not the cut. It is what fear does to your decisions before the cut ever arrives. But to understand that danger, you first need to feel what a 22% cut would actually mean at your own kitchen table in real dollars. That is next. Percentages are easy to shrug off. They stay abstract. Dollars are not so easy to ignore, so let me turn the 22% into the number that would actually show up in your account. Take the average retired worker, collecting about $2,071 a month in 2026, a figure the Social Security Administration published with this year's cost of living increase. A 22% cut removes about $455 from that check, every month, month after month, with no end date. CNBC reported that once you account for the households drawing larger benefits, the average loss could sit closer to $500 a month. The Motley Fool ran a simple example that lands even harder. A $2,000 monthly benefit, cut the way these projections suggest, could drop to around $1,440. Picture logging into your account and finding $560 less than the month before, with absolutely nothing you did to cause it and nothing you can do to appeal it. Now ask yourself the harder question, the one that makes this personal. How much of your entire retirement leans on that one check? For a great many Americans, the honest answer is almost all of it. Social Security makes up about 31% of the income of people over 65, according to figures cited by the Motley Fool, and nearly 40% of people 65 and older rely on it for at least half of everything they live on. Sit with that for a second. A 22% cut to Social Security is not a 22% cut to somebody's fun money. For a household leaning on it for half of their total income, a 22% cut to that half can mean losing more than a tenth of everything they have to live on, in one stroke, with no warning and no way to make it up. Let me make it concrete with a kitchen table you might recognize. Imagine a retired couple, both drawing their benefits, together bringing in about $3,500 a month from Social Security. That money is their rent or their mortgage. It is their groceries. It is their prescriptions and their car payment and the gas to go see family. A 22% cut takes about $770 a month off that table. Nearly $800 gone from a budget that very likely had no slack in it to begin with. So what comes out first when that happens? The medication that gets stretched to every other day, the visits to the grandchildren that get shorter and rarer, the small dignities that are the difference between a retirement and simply getting by. Now think about a person living alone, which is a reality for a huge number of older Americans. There is no second check in that household to lean on, no partner's benefit to cushion the blow. If a single retiree is collecting that average $2,071 a month, the loss of $455 is not shared or softened by anyone. It comes straight out of one person's ability to keep the heat on and the refrigerator full. For someone who already counts every dollar between checks, a cut of that size is not a matter of trimming a few luxuries. There are no luxuries left to trim. It reaches directly into the essentials, into the things that were never optional in the first place. And unlike a younger worker who can respond to a pay cut by picking up more hours or changing jobs, a retiree in their 70s often has no such lever left to pull. The check is the plan. When the check shrinks, so does the plan, with very little room to build it back. And here is the part that turns this from a distant worry into something urgent. The people who would feel the 2032 cut most sharply are not some far-off future generation you will never meet. They are the people who are in their late 50s and early 60s right now, watching this. Do the arithmetic on yourself. If you are 58 today, you turn 65 in the year 2032, the very year the fund is projected to run short. Your first years of retirement would land squarely inside the cut. If you are 62 today, you would be right in the thick of it. The trustees are not describing a problem for your grandchildren to sort out. For millions of people listening, they are describing a problem for your own first decade of collecting, if the law does not change before then. That is the true weight of this report, not a statistic on a page. A smaller check, arriving in the exact years of your life when you have the least ability to adjust, when you can no longer just work a few more years to make up the difference. And yet, as heavy as that is, the strangest and most important part of this entire story is not the cut itself. It is how badly the cut is understood by the very people it threatens, and how that misunderstanding is quietly pushing them to hurt themselves years early, on purpose, out of fear. That mistake is next, and if you take only one thing from this video, let it be this. Here is a fact that should stop you cold. Among adults 50 and older, only about 32% correctly understand that when the trust fund runs short, benefits would be reduced, not ended entirely. That comes from an AARP study reported this year. Read that number again. Roughly 2 out of every 3 people near retirement believe that Social Security is about to disappear completely. It is not. It cannot in the way they fear. The payroll taxes keep flowing in from every working American. The checks keep going out. Even in the worst case the trustees describe, about 78 cents of every promised dollar still arrives every month. But belief drives behavior, and this particular false belief is expensive. When people become convinced that the whole thing is about to vanish, they do something that feels smart in the moment and is very often a lasting mistake. They rush to claim their benefits as early as they possibly can, at age 62, to grab the money while it is still there. The logic feels airtight from the inside. Get mine before it is gone. The problem is that claiming early does absolutely nothing to protect you from a future cut. It simply stacks a second, permanent, self-inflicted cut right on top of the first one. Let me explain how that works, because it is genuinely the most valuable thing you can carry out of this video. Social Security is designed to reward you for waiting. If you claim at 62, the earliest possible age, your monthly check is permanently reduced for the rest of your life compared to what you would get by waiting until your full retirement age. And remember, in November of 2026, that full retirement age reaches 67 for everyone born in 1960 or later, according to Kiplinger and the Social Security Administration. Claim at 62 instead of 67, and you can lock in a check that is close to 30% smaller forever. Not for a few lean years, for every single month you are alive after that. So here is the terrible irony. A person who panics about a possible 22% cut arriving in 2032 and claims 5 years early to try to dodge it, may hand themselves a roughly 30% cut that starts immediately and never ends. They run screaming from a maybe and sprint directly into a certainty that is even larger. This is exactly why the fear is so costly. The 2032 cut might never actually happen because, as we saw, Congress has fixed this before and has every political incentive to fix it again. It is a projection, not a promise. But an early claim is locked in the day you make it. There is no undo button. There is no do-over. The Social Security Administration's own guidance is to look at your personalized benefit estimate, your real numbers on their website, before making any decision, rather than reacting to a headline or a rumor you saw somewhere. People who advocate for retirees are saying the very same thing, and saying it loudly. When this report came out, the chief executive of AARP, Dr. Mayekia Minter-Jordan, called it a wake-up call and said that Congress needs to act. She added that Americans have worked hard and paid into Social Security their entire lives, that they deserve to count on it, and that no family should see cuts to what they have earned. That is not the language of an organization that expects the program to vanish. That is the language of a fight that is very much still open. And with more than 71 million people relying on Social Security, it is a fight aimed at a voting group no politician wants to cross. So the takeaway of this section is not do this or do that with your specific benefits. It is something simpler and more powerful. Do not let a misunderstanding make a permanent decision on your behalf. The cut is real, yes, but it is partial, it is still years away, and it is not yet written in stone anywhere. The worst possible outcome in this entire story would be to lock in a lifetime reduction today, out of fear, in order to escape a reduction that may never even come. So what is actually on the table in Washington to close this gap? Because there are real fixes, several of them, and each one quietly lands the bill on a different group of people. That is next. The genuinely good news buried inside this grim report is that the math, while brutal, is solvable. The trustees even spell out roughly what it would take. The uncomfortable news is that every real solution takes money from someone, and the fights over exactly who pays are the whole reason Congress keeps kicking this down the road, year after year. Start with the raw size of the fix, so you know what we are dealing with. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget lays out 3 ways to close that 75-year gap if lawmakers acted immediately. One path is a payroll tax increase of about 34%, which in plain terms means raising the tax rate by roughly 4.25 percentage points, split between you and your employer. Another path is an across-the-board benefit cut of about 25%, spread over everyone. A third is a 30% cut aimed only at new beneficiaries, sparing those already retired. Those are the sizes if the country acts now, while there is time. Wait until the fund actually runs short in the early 2030s, and the same analysis warns the required change grows by roughly 15%, because there are fewer years left to spread the pain across. Every single year of delay makes the eventual fix bigger and more painful. That is the real, hidden cost of doing nothing. Now the specific idea is being debated in Washington. One that comes up in nearly every conversation is the earnings cap. Right now, Social Security only taxes your wages up to $184,500 in 2026, a figure the Social Security Administration set with this year's adjustment. Earn a single dollar above that cap, and it pays no Social Security tax at all. Some lawmakers propose raising that cap sharply, or removing it entirely, so that the highest earners pay the tax on all of their wages, the way the vast majority of workers already do on every dollar they make. Supporters say this closes a large share of the gap while touching only the very well-paid. Critics counter that it is a major tax increase that could push some earners and businesses to change how they pay themselves to get around it. The Motley Fool has outlined this as one of the leading levers on the table. A second idea is raising the full retirement age again, perhaps toward 70. Be clear-eyed about what this is. It is a benefit cut wearing a different costume. If you have to wait longer before you can collect your full check, you collect fewer years of it over your lifetime, which saves the system money. Supporters point to those longer lifespans we discussed as their justification. Opponents point out fairly that not everyone gets those extra healthy years equally, and that people in physically demanding jobs, whose bodies are worn down by 65, are hit hardest by being told to wait until 70. The Motley Fool notes this as another lever Congress could reach for. Then there is the simplest and least popular option of them all. Raise the payroll tax rate that, as we saw, has not moved in more than 40 years. A small increase spread across every working person in the country would close a meaningful part of the gap. It is straightforward, it is broad, and it is politically radioactive because no elected official wants to be the name attached to the vote that took a little more out of every paycheck in America. Notice the pattern running through all of it. Every fix is real, and every fix hands the bill to a specific group. Higher earners, or future retirees, or today's workers, or some careful blend of all three. That is precisely why this keeps getting pushed from one Congress to the next, like a problem nobody wants to be holding when the music stops. The tools to fix this exist and have existed for years. The political will is the only thing that is missing. So while Washington argues over who pays, the real question for you, the one this entire video has been building toward, is this. What can you actually control, regardless of what Congress does or fails to do? That is where we turn now. Here is the freeing part after all of that wait. You do not control the birth rate. You do not control immigration policy, or the earnings cap, or the next vote in Congress. Those things are going to happen to you no matter what. But this report, for all its heaviness, does not touch the handful of things that are genuinely in your own hands. And the people who navigate a moment like this well tend to put their energy right there, on what they can move, instead of burning it on the headlines they cannot. The first thing many people do is the simplest, and it is something you can do this week. Look at your real number. The Social Security Administration recommends checking your personalized benefit estimate on their website rather than guessing or assuming the worst. Your estimate is built from your actual earnings record, and it shows what you would collect at 62, at your full retirement age, and at 70. A surprising amount of the fear in this whole conversation simply evaporates the moment you replace a scary rumor with your own concrete figure on the screen in front of you. You cannot make a good plan around a number you have never once looked at. The second thing, for those of you still working, is the question of when to claim. As we covered, and it bears repeating because it matters so much, waiting increases your monthly check, and claiming early locks in a permanent reduction. Some people who can afford to wait are choosing to do exactly that, precisely because a larger guaranteed check for life is one of the few things in this picture that holds its value no matter what Congress ends up doing. Others genuinely cannot wait because they need the income now, or their health makes waiting the wrong bet for them. There is no single right answer that fits everyone. There is only your answer, run against your real estimate and your real circumstances, and ideally talked through with a qualified professional who can see your whole financial picture at once, not just this one piece. The third area is income that does not lean on Washington at all. The Motley Fool points to several approaches that near retirees and current retirees are weighing in light of all this. Some are choosing to work a few extra years to build up more savings before they retire. Some who are already retired are adding part-time or freelance income to take pressure off the check. And some are shifting a portion of their portfolio toward assets designed to generate steady income, such as dividend-paying stocks or fixed annuities. The idea underneath all of these is the same one. The more of your retirement that stands on its own 2 feet, the less a 22% haircut on one single slice of it can hurt the whole. Some people are also quietly revisiting their spending plan now, while there is still time to adjust it gently, rather than being forced to slash it in a panic after a cut lands. The fourth thing you control costs nothing at all, and it may matter most. It is making noise. More than 71 million people rely on Social Security, and AARP has been actively urging people to contact their representatives and press for a solution that does not cut earned benefits. Politicians move when the people who vote most reliably, and that is older Americans, make it unmistakably clear that this single issue will decide their vote. You are not a powerless spectator in that conversation. On this exact question, you are part of the single most powerful voting group in the entire country. And maybe the most important thing you control is the one we started this whole story with. Do not let panic make a permanent decision for you. The cut is real, it is partial, and it is years away, with a very real chance that Congress closes the gap before it ever arrives, the way it has done before. Reacting out of raw fear by claiming years too early or pulling your money at the wrong moment can easily cost you far more than the cut itself ever would. Steady beats scared. Almost every single time. So what should you actually be watching from here, month to month, to know which way this is breaking? Because this story is not over and it has clear signposts. That is where we finish. Keep your eye on just a few specific signposts from here, and you will always know exactly where this stands, without having to wade through the noise and the fear that fills your feed every day. The first signpost is the calendar itself. The trustees release a fresh report every single year, usually around late spring or early summer, right around the time of year we are in now. When the 2027 report arrives, the single most important number to check is the retiree fund date. If it holds steady at late 2032, the picture is stable and the plan is on track. If it slips earlier again, the way it did this year, then the pressure is building faster than expected, and it is time to pay closer attention. One date, checked once a year, tells you almost everything you need to know about the health of the whole system. The second signpost is Congress. Watch for any serious bill that touches the three levers we walked through: the earnings cap, the payroll tax rate, or the full retirement age. The first one of those to gain real momentum will quietly tell you who Washington has decided should pay the bill. A move on the cap points the finger at high earners. A move on the retirement age points it at future retirees. A move on the tax rate points it at every worker in the country. You will not need a pundit to interpret it for you. The lever they reach for first is the whole story. The third thing to watch is closer than the others, because it is happening this very year. In November of 2026, the full retirement age officially reaches 67 for everyone born in 1960 or later, according to Kiplinger and the Social Security Administration. If you are anywhere near that birthday, this directly shapes the math on when your own check will be largest. It is the one dated, certain change in this entire story that is already locked in and cannot slip, and it is only months away now. And the fourth thing to watch is closer still. It is your own account and your own mailbox. The Social Security Administration posts your personalized estimate online, and it updates as your earnings record grows. Checking it just once a year, right around the time the trustees' report comes out, keeps your plan tied to your own real numbers instead of the fear in somebody else's headline. The people who come through a moment like this in good shape are not the ones with a crystal ball. They are the ones who keep looking at their own real figures and who refuse to make a permanent move out of a temporary panic. So let me put the whole thing in a single breath so it stays with you after this ends. On June 9, 2026, the trustees moved the retiree fund's shortfall up to late 2032, the year the check could drop by about 22% unless Congress acts. It got worse because of fewer births, less immigration, and a tax change that fed back into the fund. The cut is real, but it is partial. It is still years away and the fixes clearly exist, and this country has closed a gap exactly like it before. The single greatest danger here is not the cut. It is reacting to it blindly and locking in a smaller check for the rest of your life to escape a reduction that may never come. So look at your real number. Understand your actual choices. Make noise where it counts. And whatever you do, do not let fear sign a decision you can never take back. This video is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Laws and policies change. Always consult a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.